Handheld gaming. It's been a staple for many since the beginning of our gaming journeys, from catching Geodudes and Zubats on the bus as a carefree kid, to slaying inner demons in Persona 4 Golden as a slightly depressed adult. Handheld gaming has held a special place in many of our lives. The evolution of handheld gaming has been meteoric. I remember how mind-blowing it was to first get my hands on Tony Hawk's Underground 2 remix on a friend's PSP and see handheld gaming start to compete with what we were playing on consoles. And that was in 2005. In 2017, Nintendo released the Switch, which truly bridged that gap and changed the game, letting us play Zelda, Mario, Skyrim, and more traditionally home console games on the go in a consumer-friendly capacity. It's one of the best-selling consoles of all time that only seems to be getting more and more successful as the years go, which makes this thing a fascinating prospect. This, as many of you may know, is the Steam Deck, the handheld gaming PC created by Valve that even KindaFunny's own Greg Miller can't seem to get his hands on. But he's not alone. Demand for the Steam Deck has been massive, with the promise of gaming PC levels of power on the go at a consumer-friendly price. Upon announcement, as a Switch Pro truther and someone who's tired of looking at Pokemon Legends Arceus trying to do its best Pokemon Stadium impression, the Steam Deck immediately caught my attention. But the Steam Deck is way more than just a Switch Pro. It comes with the architectural building blocks of new-gen consoles, running on an AMD Zen 2 APU, boosting a high 16 gigabytes of RAM, with a display that has a max res of 1280 by 800p, which may not sound like much, but means that games are gonna run smooth as hell on this thing. It's also rocking SSD memory, touchscreen, twin trackpads, full gyro support, and is powered by Steam OS with a full Linux desktop mode built in for good measure. Put simply, the Steam Deck does everything. I personally got the 256 gigabyte model, which is about enough to store one Call of Duty. It's a beast of a device with the promise to run games like Elden Ring, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, Death Stranding, and God of War 2018. And for me, it was the idea of playing God of War 2018 in handheld form that initially sold me on the Steam Deck. And immediately upon getting my new handheld delivered, I booted it up, downloaded God of War, and proceeded to play everything on my Steam Deck, except for God of War. I'm somebody who's typically not all in on PC gaming. I grew up as a console kid, shifting between Nintendo and PlayStation consoles, only to occasionally dip into PC when playing one-off games with friends, or to try indie titles like Undertale, which would often make their way to PC first. While messing around with the Steam Deck over the last few weeks, I've learned a series of lessons. I'm calling these lessons Gabe Newell's 10 Steam Commandments. It's a misleading title because there's only 4 of them, but 4 Steam Commandments didn't sound right, unlike Roger add reverb to this. Gabe Newell's 10 Steam Commandments. It just rolls off the tongue. Commandment number 1. Thou shalt explore the Steam store. God of War and AAA games were the driving force of my interest in the Steam Deck, but as I was clicking download and getting ready to reunite with Kratos and Atreus, I was quickly pulled away by the selection of games on the Steam store in my Steam library that I recognized. Games that I'd heard about casually in conversations or bought to play later and never got around to, because I associate my work with my PC. It's hard to separate it when I spend 8 hours a day sitting here doing this. Indies have taken up the bulk of my playtime on the Steam Deck, and because of that, I'm introducing a new segment just for this episode of The Blessing Show called Deck Appointment, where I tell you about some of the games worth making time to play on the Steam Deck. Number 1, Rogue Legacy 2. It's a game that I'd been looking forward to, but was bummed out to hear wasn't launching on PlayStation or Switch. It's the sequel to one of the most addicting roguelites I've ever played, and like its predecessor, I spent multiple days obsessing over exploring its shifting castle walls, upgrading my various classes of characters, and dying over and over again. Number 2, Patrick's Parabox. This is a block puzzle game similar to Baba Is You that deals with manifold garden style infinite looping spaces where you'll need to think hard about the rules it sets up in order to find any given solution. Number 3, Vampire Survivors. This is another PC exclusive roguelite built on Castlevania assets that sees the player surviving incoming hordes of enemies for as long as possible. Number 4, Electhead, a side-scrolling puzzle platformer with a satisfying art style and soundtrack, where your head powers the platforms you stand on. In only a few weeks with the Steam Deck, the list somehow goes on with games like Koromon, Soundfall, and Tunchi. Not all of these games are exclusively PC, but unlike consoles, all of them are here. PC has a wealth of games that go beyond what's available on consoles due to it being a testbed for new, smaller, and fresh ideas. Right now, my options are limitless. Which brings me to commandment number 2. Play the way that allows you to play. Where I've been focusing in on dipping into games I wouldn't be able to on consoles, Roger's Steam Deck experience has been more about the options to customize and play how he wants. Roger, take it away.
Thanks, Blessing. Huge fan of the ice cream video. Well, much like Bless, I've been picking up a lot of games from various Steam sales throughout the years that I've been meaning to play, but this seems like the perfect way to do so. I played Katana Zero, really great. I've been playing through Disco Elysium, absolutely incredible experience. But when I started playing Wolfenstein: The New Order on the Steam Deck, I started to realize something not only about the Steam Deck, but most importantly about myself. I'm drowning in these options. With the Switch, I've never had this problem because I have no choice. I'm just stuck with whatever way that HAL Laboratory decides to optimize Kirby for the Switch. But the Steam Deck allows me to tinker to my heart's desire, and I've noticed that my heart's desire is pretty fucking large. Because instead of just playing Wolfenstein, you know, the normal way, I was attempting to create the ultimate setup, utilizing all of these trackpads, the back bumper, the gyro. It all started to become very overwhelming. And then I realized these are options, as in they're optional. So I guess the moral of this commandment is this: if a game runs out of the box pretty okay, don't worry about changing anything until you find legitimate problems with the way the deck handles it, because fun and play are at the core of the device, not the tinkering. But also, that leads us to commandment number 3, because while Wolfenstein works great on the Steam Deck, not every game is a Steam Deck game.
If you've seen me play Apex Legends and thought my skills were bad before, wait until you see me play on the Steam Deck. It's like watching Greg Miller try to order one online. This isn't to say that these games don't run well or function as intended. Apex actually runs pretty solidly. It's just that my Steam Deck experience has been less about Twitch shooters and more about games I can experience in bite-sized chunks. I've played so much Death Stranding on my Steam Deck, a game that aggressively pushes fidelity and visuals, yet a game that fits right at home on handheld because it doesn't ask you to be on for multiple hours at a time. Death Stranding is a game that I can get a satisfying 15-minute session in with, and it's been a surprise Steam Deck hit for me. Finding the games that fit at home here have been what's made my Steam Deck experience worthwhile. Which brings me to the final Gabe Newell Steam commandment. Commandment number 4. I can't actually talk about commandment number 4 on this platform, at least not without Roger blurring my mouth and bleeping out the sensitive bits of it. Let me put it this way. The Steam Deck has been a perfect place to play classic video games in ways that Doug Bowser would be very unhappy about. Late last year, Nintendo dropped the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack, promising access to some of our favorite Nintendo 64 and Sega Genesis games on top of access to a lot of Super Nintendo and NES games already available on the service. Miyamoto and company are the harbingers of some of the most iconic and important video games in history, and allowing access to those games should be cause for celebration. Yet, right on cue, as that service started to roll out, DK's paw curled, and we were greeted with a plethora of issues on the service, such as laggy input timing, games suffering bad frame rates, Ocarina of Time's Water Temple being bugged, the inability to remap controls, and the list goes on. But when it comes to a lackluster offering of classic games, Nintendo is far from the only culprit. PlayStation is currently rolling out PlayStation Plus Premium, a tier of their service providing access to some of their classic libraries. Yet, beyond just the concerns about how disappointingly limited their library offering is so far, the tech concerns are there as well, with the inferior PAL versions of the games being reportedly the ones offered over NTSC. Not to mention, PS3 games are still only available via cloud streaming, making them a hassle to access without excellent internet connection, and even then still suffering lag input. Xbox is the platform treating their classic games the best, with automatic up-resing along with FPS boost on select titles from the 360 and original Xbox era. Yet, as much as they're taking steps in the right direction, there are still large bulks of that library missing, and that's where the Steam Deck comes in. Steam Deck is arguably the best place to play classic games. Its core promise of being a PC on the go has made it simple to get emulation up and running. The emulation community has been making strides for decades on PC platforms, improving and making emulation easy for anyone to jump in. And as these big publishers are making it harder and harder to access the games we love, PC ecosystems have made it easier and easier. The Steam Deck emulation community in an extremely short time has streamlined the experience to the point where, as long as you have your ROMs and BIOS for specific consoles, it's as easy as dragging, dropping, and running a script to have your games organized folder by folder with custom art to make it look pretty in your library. And the games run well too. I was shocked to boot up and see the game run in widescreen and look damn near identical to how I remember it looking when I played it in 2004. Control mapping is easy, and being able to play on the go and try to save the from before learning she's in another castle hits just as hard in 2022 on the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck has ushered me into the PC ecosystem deeper than ever before within mere weeks of getting my hands on it. It carries all of the magic of handheld gaming, but brings with it the benefits of PC gaming along with the approachability of a home console. It might be early to say, but the Steam Deck legitimately feels like a step into the future. And I'm not just saying that because I've been playing Donkey Kong 64 on it either. It's legitimately... Wait, Roger, did you censor out where I said Donkey Kong?
Nintendo, open up!
I'm gonna
But you are Nintendo. Like, you have to be able to stop him. Like, he is emulating the games on the Steam Deck. Nintendo games on the Steam Deck. That's illegal. Well, I know that that's typically not something you would. Why? So is it okay? Don't think of it so much as a police situation. Don't think of it so much as, I mean, you have lawyers. You're shutting down YouTube channels about music all the time. Can't you just go to his house with a cease and desist, tell him to stop, and then you confiscate the Steam Deck and you give it to me?